Fast growth plus female strong. Ying Xian fell asleep and dreamed of the end of the world. After waking up, she wanted to comfort herself, but it was just a dream. But she didn't expect that the end of the world really came. The once bustling city was littered with corpses overnight, filled with burning, killing, looting, and humanity lost its humanity. But no matter what era it is respected by those with strength. Ying Xian will not let himself become a fish on the chopping board and be slaughtered by others. If she wants to do it, she will be the top powerhouse in the apocalypse, no one dares to provoke her. Keywords of the novel. The end of the world comes to the peak of life with my power without pop-ups. The end of the world comes to the peak of life with my power. Download the complete collection of TXT. The end of the world comes to the peak of life with my power. Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Apocalyptic Emergence. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Apocalyptic Emergence. Ying Xian woke up from her sleep. Just now she had a nightmare, dreaming that the end of the world, which only appeared in movies, had arrived. The entire K-city was filled with wandering zombies and corpses everywhere. When they see people, they will attack them in groups and bite them. Even if they are accidentally scratched by their nails, they will become the same monster as them. Due to the zombie outbreak, countless cars lost control and caused a series of car accidents. The plane also lost control and crashed directly into a tall building. The originally quiet and peaceful K-city instantly turned into a purgatory, and foreign media reported that this situation has also been encountered abroad. At the end of the dream, a zombie pounced towards Ying Xian, its decaying face quickly approaching with a nauseating stench, and sticky saliva was about to drip onto its body. The next second, she woke up. Ying Xian looked at the bedroom in front of him in shock, his back already covered in cold sweat. At this moment, her phone received a message. Yao Yao and I have already arrived at the dormitory. Su Wu said they will arrive tomorrow. This is a message from her roommate Chu Zheng. Ying Xian stared at the shiny phone screen for a long time before finally recovering from the nightmare. Okay, let's see you tomorrow. Ying Xian replied with a voice and then went to the bathroom to take a shower. The warm water flowed on his body, and Ying Xian looked at the snow-white tiles on the wall, inexplicably recalling the dream he had just had. What should she do if those things that only appear in movies actually appear in reality? The hour and minute hands of the wall clock in the bedroom gradually overlap at 12. After taking a shower, Ying Xian finally felt a little comfortable. Just as she was about to pour out a cup of hot water to drink, she heard a few strange noises outside the window. She pulled open the tightly closed curtains and glanced out of the window. With just one glance, it made her nauseous to the point where she almost vomited. Accompanied by fear and shock. Ying Xian saw several residents covered in blood with dull expressions on their faces, covered in wounds from being bitten. They wandered near the green belt of the community, only to see a resident who came out to take out garbage, so they rushed in groups. In less than 5 minutes, the person was torn to pieces, leaving only blood on the ground, organs, and limbs severed. She tightly covered her mouth to prevent herself from exclaiming, and after the person was torn apart, the group of residents who could no longer be called humans wandered aimlessly again. The sharp phone ringtone suddenly rang, breaking the silence in the room. Ying Xian quickly answered the phone. Ying Xian, can you hear me? Don't go back to school tomorrow, there are crazy people everywhere. Yao Yao and I have locked our dormitories, and now the whole school is filled with crazy people killing people. On the other end of the phone was Chu Zheng's anxious voice, and Ying Xian was stunned. There were also zombies in the school. But now is not the time to be stunned, she hurriedly replied, me and I are here too. I just had a dream that the end of the world in the movie came, just like the current situation. They are not crazy, they are zombies. Chu Zheng and Yang Yaoyao both took a deep breath. Zombies does this species, which used to only appear in movies, actually appear in reality now. Does this mean that the apocalypse has really come? Now that everyone has just finished their vacation and returned to school, there is not much food in the dormitory. Even if the door is locked, there is no need to worry about zombies entering, but sooner or later it will starve to death. I know now, please protect yourself. After Chu Jing finished speaking, she hung up the phone. Ying Xian held the gradually fading phone and immediately went to pick up the birthday gift her father gave her when she was 18 years old. Ying Xian's father is a retired Special Forces soldier. After retiring, he has been a bit talkative, always feeling like someone is going to harm his family. Later, Ying Xian, who was only 5 years old, was taught fighting by his father for 14 years. During this period, he even taught her everything he learned during his 10 years as a Special Forces soldier, until he and Ying's mother died in a car accident. When Ying Xian was 18 years old, her father gave her an extended version of a Damascus knife made by a private craftsman, which was about 40 centimeters long. The blade that had been cut was as sharp as mud. This knife has always been treasured in her safe. After receiving this knife, Ying Xian only pulled out the scabbard once to see it. Now is the second time this knife has been unsheathed. The intricate and gorgeous patterns on the blade caught her eye, and she suddenly felt a bit dazed, but without hesitation, she put it inside the scabbard. But due to the upcoming return to school, there is not much food storage at home. Ying Xian has a headache. She has read many apocalyptic novels before, but now that the apocalypse has truly befallen her, there is always a feeling of being separated. She took all the charging banks at home and charged them before opening Weibo. Weibo's hot search is dominated by the apocalypse and zombies. Ying Xian casually clicked on one and saw a video of zombies eating people taken by someone. The entire Weibo homepage is filled with requests for help, and there are also internet celebrities who can't help but go outdoors with their phones to do live broadcasts in order to gain popularity. In the end, they are torn apart by a group of zombies. The alarm hotline has also been bombed, and it is not difficult to guess that the police station has also been occupied. The phone rang again. It was news from Chu Jing. We don't know how long it can last, but you need to be more careful when you're alone outside. Someone's food has already been stolen from our building. Ying Xian sighed, took a knowing emoji, and began counting the food at home. After her parents passed away, she rarely returned to this home except for holidays, and even during holidays, she only bought and ate a day. The refrigerator at home is already empty, with only a few buckets of instant noodles, a few packets of snacks, and a few bottles of carbonated drinks left. At this moment, someone walked past Ying Xian's doorstep with a flashlight, and her door was immediately knocked on. "Xiao Ying, are you at home?" A familiar male voice came from outside the door, and Ying Xian recognized that the owner of the voice was Uncle Zhang, who lived in the villa next to her. She nervously clenched the Damascus knife in her hand, hesitating for a while but still hesitant to answer. Uncle Zhang guessed that the little girl was afraid to speak, so he had to put the things in his hand at her doorstep before speaking. "I guess as a little girl, you didn't have anything to eat at home, so I shared some food with my wife and left it at the door. Remember to take it." After speaking, Uncle Zhang left and passed by the window of her first-floor living room. Ying Xian's heart warmed. Uncle Zhang has been taking good care of her since he found out that her parents have passed away. Occasionally, when she has free time on weekends and stays at home for 1 or 2 days, he also calls her to eat at home. She couldn't help but apologize in her heart for thinking that Uncle Zhang was a bad person just now. Uncle Zhang didn't bring much, only a few basic seasonings and a can of spicy sauce, as well as a few unopened instant noodles and a few green vegetables. Ying Xian put the things into the kitchen and began to calculate what to do in the next few days. The villa area where she lives is not very crowded due to its remote location, and at best, there are less than 100 people. Ying Xian searched around the house and found the hiking backpack that his father had bought before. He put in important household documents, as well as his father's discharge certificate and his mother's ID card, which had been cut in one corner. At home, there were still a few pre-purchased submachine jackets. Ying Xian stuffed them all into his bag, and also packed a few small but satiety snacks and a bottle of cola, making all the preparations for a temporary escape. A dull and drowsy feeling struck, but Ying Xian dared not sleep. She pushed the cabinets and sofas at home, blocked the doors and windows, and checked several times for any omissions before lying in bed. At the moment when the sunlight pierced through the night, the roaring sounds echoed throughout the entire community. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. First Team Travel. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. First Team Travel. Ying Xian, who had finally fallen asleep, was also awakened by the sound. She immediately got out of bed and opened the curtains to look outside. The roads in the residential area that she could see were more or less filled with zombies wandering, and the asphalt road was also filled with blood and human limbs. Ying Xian immediately took out his phone and wanted to send a message to Chu Zheng, but after pressing the send button, he kept circling. The signal is only one grid left, and the Wi-Fi is even more disconnected. It took a while for the message to be sent out, but there was no response from the other side. Ying Xian's heart also rose. After a simple wash, she held her phone and waited for messages until almost 9 o'clock when Chu Zheng replied. There are more zombies today, and Su Wu hasn't replied yet. I'm worried. Chu Zheng's ellipsis left Ying Xian feeling uneasy. She was at home, while Chu Zheng and Yang Yaoyao were in the dormitory, at least protected by buildings. What about Su Wu? She said yesterday afternoon that she couldn't buy a plane ticket or a high-speed train. Her father took her to school and she won't be able to arrive until this morning. I don't know how the road conditions are now, but the ground is covered with zombies. Ying Xian dared not think further. Since her parents passed away, Chu Zheng and Su Wu have been guiding and caring for her in school. They haven't even called their parents in the dormitory for the past 2 months, just to be afraid that she might feel upset. Ying Xian was able to overcome this haze thanks to their tolerance and warmth. Don't worry, at least Su Wu is with her family. Ying Xian comforted Chu Zheng by deceiving herself, but she looked out the window and suddenly felt very sad. Suddenly, several male homeowners from the community appeared in her sight. This small team composed of male homeowners consists of nearly 10 people, each with familiar faces. They have all kinds of hard things in their hands, including kitchen knives and shovel, and even some people have picked up iron pans. This group of people would gather around a single zombie, smash its head with their weapons, and cut it into several pieces. Ying Xian also found that as long as the zombie's brain is not smashed, they can still move. As mentioned in novels and movies, it is their brains that control zombies. Someone glanced at Ying Xian's face in the curtain seam and smiled at her. Little sister, don't be afraid, we're here. The male voice is full and gentle, and after speaking, he followed the main army to continue cleaning up the zombies in the community. Ying Xianxia picked up his phone and watched real-time messages on Weibo. As expected, there were more and more zombies. The same goes for foreign countries, this is a global disaster. Officials have also summarized several characteristics of zombies. Zombies are attracted by sound and blood, and their reactions are slow, but their movements are only slightly slower than normal people. They have a keen sense of hearing and smell, and their weakness lies in the brain. As long as they don't damage the brain, they can still move, whether it's a broken arm or leg. And the way zombies are infected is through blood or saliva. As long as they are bitten or the wound is stained with zombie blood or saliva, they will be infected into monsters like them within 10 minutes. Meanwhile, being scratched by zombie nails can also lead to infection. The more blood or saliva comes into contact with zombies, the faster the infection rate. The characteristics of infection are accelerated wound decay, redness of eye white, and graying of iris. Within 10 minutes, infected individuals will lose their self-awareness and completely transform into monsters like them. At the end of the article is a bold sentence. Please stock up as much food and water as possible. The country is doing its best to eliminate them. Protect yourself and try not to go out. There are comments in the comments section, so Ying Xian flipped through a few and then closed Weibo. It's early September now, and summer hasn't passed yet. The room is getting hotter and hotter, even with the air conditioning on, Ying Xian can still feel the heat coming in through the glass. That team has almost cleaned up the zombies in the community, and Ying Xian heard someone shouting with a loudspeaker. Are there any living people left? We need to go out and find food, voluntarily participate. Those who are willing to go will join us in WeChat groups, while those who don't come will find ways to solve their own food problems. Ying Xian opened a gap and looked out. The team was missing 2 or 3 people, each with fatigue and numbness on their faces. Eating things at home for at most 2 to 3 days, and most of them are vegetarian without nutrients, making it impossible to maintain the nutrients the body needs every day. The consequence is insufficient nutrient intake, and the body will also weaken. After all, she has never faced zombies directly, and they were all living beings before. Even if she practiced them herself, she could get hurt if she didn't pay attention. Ying Xian threw herself onto the bed and covered her head with a blanket. I don't know how long it has been, but Ying Xian found his phone from the messy blanket and connected it to a relay in the homeowner group that was willing to go out and search for supplies. The time for going out to search for supplies is set at 2 p.m. Ying Xian found a long-sleeved submachine suit that his father had worn before, and then changed into more pocket-work pants and easy-to-move boots. He wrapped himself tightly from neck to toe before picking up the knife. She tore off a T-shirt, wrapped the slightly slippery handle around it, and tried the sharpness of the blade again. Under the light, a blade with a cold glow easily sliced off a corner of the sofa. Ying Xian took a few more masks and put them in his pocket, then he finally felt relieved. At 1:30 p.m., the collection team had already gathered at the flower bed in the center of the community. There is a small pond around the flower bed, which originally housed several beautiful koi. At this moment, the clear water in the pond had been stained red with blood, and several fragments of human limbs were floating. Ying Xian walked to the middle of them with a backpack on her back, her gaze scanning the small team of 20 or so people, most of whom were from the team she had seen this morning. There were only 5 women in the team, including her. While the men were smoking and chatting, they also pushed the woman towards the safest team. There is a small supermarket less than 1 kilometer away from the community, and customers mainly come from the owners of the community and several small shop staff nearby. The goal of the group this time is to go to that supermarket. The distance was very close, but everyone still chose to drive over. Although the sound of driving may disturb zombies, having a car can at least run fast and still carry them. The knife in Ying Xian's hand, even though not unsheathed, is still very prominent among everyone. Yang Lu, who organized the search team for supplies, also noticed. He extinguished his cigarette butt and walked to Ying Xian's side. Ying Xian recognized him as the person who smiled at him this morning, but still instinctively clenched the scabbard. Little sister, don't be afraid. My name is Yang Lu. I want to ask you, where did you get the knife in your hand? Do you still have it? This question is reasonable and reasonable. The people in the team are all wielding weapons with little killing power, and in terms of attack, they are not as good as the knives that should be used. Ying Xian shook her head and said, "It was my dad who gave me one." Yang Lu nodded thoughtfully, his gaze fixed on the knife, and a faint smile rose from the corner of his mouth. Little sister, this knife is probably not very useful in your hands. Why don't you give it to me so that I can protect you more? Ying Xian lowered his eyes and mockingly curled the corner of his mouth, but his voice remained gentle. How did Uncle Yang know that holding it would be of no use to me? And this knife was given to me by my father. With just one word from Uncle Yang, I'll give it to you. Isn't it too bad for my father? The words were spoken without any courtesy, and Yang Lu's gaze instantly cooled down. At this moment, another villa door was shattered from inside, and 2 zombies stumbled out and rushed straight towards Ying Xian and Yang Lu standing in the outer circle of the team. Yang Lu's gaze flickered slightly, and he took a few steps back, leaving Ying Xian directly at the nearest place to the zombie. As long as the zombie bites her, I can take her knife for granted. Ying Xian felt the foul smell getting closer and closer, and people around him who had not killed zombies also dispersed out of fear. She gritted her teeth and quickly unsheathed the knife, wrapping it behind the zombies. She struck the back of one zombie's head with a knife, then quickly pulled it out and slashed it horizontally at the neck of the other zombie. The zombie with its head chopped off roared all over, turned around and rushed towards Ying Xian. The zombie with its head half hanging from the neck chopped off also rushed towards Ying Xian. Ying Xian quickly passed through what his father had taught him in his mind. He lightly tapped his toes, supported the zombie's shoulder, jumped up, and fiercely inserted the tip of the knife into the top of one zombie's head, then suddenly rotated the handle of the knife. The zombie fell to the ground in an instant, and Ying Xian dealt with the other one in the same way, only then breathed a sigh of relief. Yang Lu gritted his teeth in anger when he saw that neither of the two zombies could harm Ying Xian at all. He was also grateful that he had not directly fought with her just now, otherwise he would have swung his knife and cut his neck. Ying Xian adjusted her breathing and walked up to Yang Lu, covered in zombie blood. Her lips still smiled gently. "Uncle Yang, do you still think I'm useless with this knife?" Yang Lu was angry, but he didn't dare to confront her head-on, so he shook his head and said, "Just now. Was I presumptuous? You should hold the knife, little sister." The smile on Ying Xian's lips remained unchanged. "It's okay, it's almost 2 o'clock. Uncle Yang, go and count the number of people." He didn't say anything to Ying Xian anymore, but walked back to his previous position and finally checked the protective measures and weapons on his body. The people who had just gathered scared away a few due to the appearance of zombies. There were only 3 people left, including Ying Xian, and the team only had a dozen or so people standing here, with a look of fear on their faces. At 2 o'clock sharp, the convoy left the community in a grand procession. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Collecting Materials. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Collecting Materials. The vehicle slowly drove out of the entrance of the community, and more zombies were seen along the way. When everyone saw the sign of the small supermarket, they all unconsciously lowered their voices. Ying Xian was sitting in Yang Lu's car. Yang Lu's face was not good, and everyone didn't speak much along the way, even their expressions didn't change much. Or rather, all they had on their faces was numbness. In addition to Ying Xian, there were 2 other people in Yang Lu's car, both of whom were from the group that came out in the morning. They looked in their 30s and had a very strong physique, making them not easy to mess with at first glance. Everyone parked their car at the entrance of the small supermarket, and now they got off the car in 2s and 3s. The zombies wandering outside the supermarket, smelling the breath of living people, all rushed towards them. Fortunately, there were not many zombies, and in addition, 2 zombies were killed in the community before. Ying Xian drew his sword and rushed towards the zombie with Yang Lu and others, using his extremely sharp Damascus knife to chop at the zombie like a vegetable. Blood splattered everywhere, limbs flying horizontally, and many team members who came out for the first time had extremely poor expressions. Finally, someone couldn't control their nausea and started vomiting while holding onto the big tree next to them. But now is not the time to vomit. Yang Lu looked around at the zombies lured by the sound, frowned, and immediately ordered everyone to pry open the tightly closed roller shutter door of the supermarket and then pull it down. The zombie outbreak occurred at midnight, and there was no one in the supermarket. Yang Lu turned on the lights, and the dark space lit up one by one. "Don't compete, take whatever you want, otherwise don't go back," Yang Lu sternly ordered, and most of the members of the team witnessed his decisiveness in leading people to kill zombies. In addition, just now he was able to save the entire team, and no one had any objections to his words. More than 10 people were running around in the supermarket, and Ying Xian was no exception. The hiking backpack she brought when she came out was considered the largest bag at home. She was afraid that she wouldn't be able to carry it when she was ready to go back, so she only packed enough rice and noodles, as well as scattered chocolates that could fill her stomach but didn't take up space. She suddenly remembered the kindness she received from her neighbor and turned her gaze to the distant mother and baby counter. Uncle Zhang next door is in his 40s or 50s, and his wife got pregnant during winter vacation. Lao Lizi stayed at home to take care of his pregnant wife and was unwilling to come out. This can also be understood, after all, if nothing unexpected happens, in just over a month, Uncle Zhang's wife will be giving birth. Ying Xian pulled a large plastic bag from the cashier and filled it with 2 cans of milk powder, as well as many mother and baby products, ready to be sent back to him. The group was packed to the brim, but the supermarket didn't seem to be missing much. Ying Xian saw that everyone was carrying several large plastic bags in their hands, and the bags or suitcases they brought out were almost too stuffed to close. Just as everyone was about to leave, Yang Lu had just walked up to the rolling shutter door when he heard the creaking sound outside. Feeling the scent of a living person, the zombies outside the door began to knock against the door. The light rolling shutter door was about to collapse when it was hit, and Yang Lu's eyes stiffened. He immediately led everyone and prepared to leave from the back door. But they have too much on them, so their running speed slows down. A large number of zombies quickly deformed the rolling shutter door, and they were not afraid of pain. The zombies closest to the rolling shutter door had been squeezed and deformed, looking very terrifying. The back door of this supermarket was locked from the outside after the salesperson left, but it couldn't be opened inside. In addition, it was a heavy anti-theft door, so the only option was to pry the lock. The zombies quickly broke through the door and chased after the team that was prying open the back door lock. Yang Lu immediately put down the things in his hand and called on the team members to start fighting against the zombies. But there are always people who are unwilling to exchange their lives for supplies, tightly holding onto bags or backpacks, huddled in the corner, cursing the person who pried the lock for being so slow, and shrinking themselves into the corner. Ying Xian cursed inwardly, suppressing his inner reluctance, and threw the bag and things in his hand into the corner, directly pulling out the knife. Fortunately, she wore a mask, which could block out some bad odors. Just now at the entrance of the supermarket, Ying Xian found that the method of using a knife tip to pierce through the zombie's skull to destroy the brain was too laborious. Therefore, this time, she decided to pierce through the zombie's eyes first. With his agile body movements, Ying Xian thrust his knife into the eyes of the zombies one after another, and then forcefully turned around, directly crushing their brains. Yang Lu saw that Ying Xian had good skills, so he instinctively moved towards her position and let all the zombies attack Ying Xian, relieving his own pressure a lot. After a fierce battle, those who fought with zombies were more or less covered in the blood or brain of zombies. Ying Xianyu glanced at the person in the corner who was bitten on the arm by a zombie that had pounced on him, but still unwilling to let go of the supplies in his hand. Someone has been bitten. She loudly reminded everyone that those who were hesitant to hold supplies quickly checked around and also became a mess. They were pushing and shoving each other, but the scene was too chaotic and they still didn't push the person who was bitten out. The person who was bitten gradually had crimson blood in their eyes, dropped the supplies in their hands, and took a bite directly at the nearest person. The person who was prying at the door was also being pushed and shoved by a few people. With a click, the tool for prying the lock broke directly into the door lock. The only back door couldn't be opened now, and everyone was filled with despair. They even started cursing and running around. But here either zombies or people with red eyes are killed, and those who escape are either bitten by zombies or accidentally injured. The small team, which was already understaffed, is now experiencing a significant reduction in personnel. Ying Xian had already turned red in the eyes, with zombie blood splattering on her face and a drop sliding down her forehead in her eyes. Yang Lu gritted his teeth in anger as he watched the sharp decrease in the number of people. Are these people all trash? Don't kill zombies, just wait for others to finish it and enjoy it for yourself. But fortunately, most of the remaining people are the ones who killed the zombies with him this morning. Although everyone was panicked, they didn't hesitate to kill the zombies at all. Ying Xian's sharp eyes caught a glimpse of a lounge on his right side. There's a lounge on the right. Enter the lounge. This sound made Yang Lu instantly happy. He walked through the entangled people and zombies, kicked open the door of the lounge, and crawled in. The living person immediately disposed of the zombie at hand and quickly entered the lounge. It wasn't until the door of the lounge was blocked with a cabinet by Yang Lu and another person that everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The 17 people who came out together now only have 8 left. Yang Lu immediately began to check everyone for any wounds. Now that everyone has gone through the fight just now, they are all very tired. If anyone gets infected, everyone will be ruined. As expected, Yang Lu found a scratch on a young man and he immediately spoke with irresistible dignity. Xiaodong, you've been scratched. Go out, I can't risk so many people's lives. The young man known as Xiaodong's gaze shook, and he knew he couldn't resist Yang Lu. He quickly pleaded, Yang Gu, don't do it, it may not be infected. Don't drive me out. The people in the room were quite sober and began to blame him one after another. Not necessarily infected. We don't want to bury you. Yeah, you can't joke about our lives. Get out of here now. Fool, you know you've been scratched and still have the face to come in. If I were you, I would have committed suicide. The constant stream of accusations almost shattered Xiaodong's psyche. I don't want to die. My wife is still waiting for me at home. This sentence moved the only woman present besides Ying Xian. Why don't you drive Xiaodong away? Maybe he won't get infected. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Unexpected Awakening Ability. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Unexpected Awakening Ability. As soon as these words were spoken, the normal people present all looked at the woman who was speaking with strange eyes. Although we are usually neighbors who get along well, what is the current situation? Now is the end of the world. If your Virgin Mary's heart attacks, it is very likely to involve a group of people in a cruel situation. Ying Xian usually watches movies or novels with apocalyptic themes, and the most common comment in the comments section or bullet comments is, kill the Virgin Mary first when the apocalypse comes. I didn't expect that in this situation, there would still be a living Virgin Mary. Although Xiaodong appears to be normal now, the authorities have issued notices that it will mutate within 10 minutes. She didn't speak, perhaps because she had wasted too much energy while killing zombies just now. Ying Xian was now completely unconscious and weak. Yang Lu was too lazy to talk nonsense to that woman, so he directly greeted 2 or 3 people, moved the cabinet that blocked the door, and threw the reluctant Xiaodong out directly. After being thrown out, Xiaodong still begged the people inside the door to let him in, but soon his voice was swallowed up by the roar of the zombie. His mournful cries echoed outside the door, and in less than a minute, blood seeped through the crack in the door. Yang Lu's expression was not good, and his eyes were full of malice, but in order to make everyone not feel too cruel, he had to put on a regretful expression. That woman dare not say anything more, shrinking herself into a corner as a transparent person. She dared not kill the zombies. She had just saved her life by hiding beside Ying Xian and Yang Lu. Now that almost everyone else is listening to Yang Lu, she naturally dared not argue against him anymore. After all, she doesn't want to be thrown out like Xiaodong. The doors and windows were all blocked by everyone's belongings. After briefly dividing the supplies that were brought in just now to replenish their energy, everyone found a place to rest. Ying Xian leaned on the chair, with his back facing others. For some reason, a fine cold sweat suddenly broke out on her forehead, making her whole body uncomfortable. She just checked herself and her whole body was tightly wrapped, without any wounds, so she didn't get thrown out like Xiaodong. But what is the situation now? Ying Xian's thoughts suddenly stopped, his eyes rolled over, and he passed out. Most people are so tired that they fall asleep without noticing anything wrong with Ying Xian, including Yang Lu. At this moment, a emerald green light was gradually forming in Ying Xian's brain, transforming into a crystal nucleus the size of a fingernail. The light emitted by the crystal nucleus wandered throughout the body, gradually awakening Ying Xian's consciousness, but his eyelids were heavy and unable to open as if they had been filled with lead. The feeling of fatigue was gradually engulfed by the light, and Ying Xian tightly closed his eyes, feeling the sudden force that appeared in his body. I don't know how long it has been, but the heaviness of the eyelids gradually disappears. Ying Xian opened his eyes and his gaze fell on his fingertips. A emerald green tender bud is slowly emerging from its fingertips, rapidly growing into a dark vine, growing longer and longer, until it falls to the ground. And she can manipulate the shape and movement of vines with her mind. She was somewhat shocked by everything supernatural in front of her, but beyond that, she thought that even zombies could appear, and it was not strange for humans to have supernatural abilities. She manipulated the vine with her mind to disappear at her fingertips, took out a wet towel from her pocket, wiped away the sticky cold sweat on her forehead, and finally breathed a sigh of relief. But she had no intention of telling anyone about it, at least until the human awakening of superpowers was exposed. She had no intention of saying it. Who knows who is human and who is ghost in the apocalypse? Moreover, Yang Lu had previously tricked himself in order to obtain the sword, and Ying Xian couldn't tell everyone that he had a superpower. If Yang Lu goes crazy, no one knows what he will do. The others were still resting, the outside noise continued, and the zombies didn't stop knocking on the door. Fortunately, the door is open outwards, and the cabinet that is blocking the door is also filled with things. Even if the losers collide, the door is tightly closed. Ying Xian's bag fell to the ground during the fight, and he didn't have time to bring it in just now. Now in the entire lounge, there are only 2 small backpacks filled with food, which is not enough for 9 people to eat. Fortunately, Ying Xian is not hungry at all now. She took a bag of drawing paper from the lounge table and carefully wiped off the knife stained with blood and brain tissue on her hand. Any liquid on the zombie's body could potentially lead to infection, and she didn't want to be bitten or scratched to death, but instead became infected because of these liquids. As it gradually darkened outside, Ying Xian took out his phone and sent a message to Chu Zheng, who was still in the dormitory. "Are you all okay?" The message still took several rounds to be sent out. It took over a minute to respond before receiving the news from Chu Zheng. "We're all fine, but there's almost no food left in the dormitory. Someone in our neighboring dormitory can't bear it anymore and jumped off the building." When reading, Ying Xian didn't have much communication with the neighboring dormitories, but at least they were all classmates. Now that she has received news of someone jumping off a building, she is also feeling uneasy. And all the messages she sent to Su Wu were buried in the sea, without a reply. The 2 of them chatted for a while with their network cards, and then Ying Xian put away his phone. Chu Zheng in the dormitory was not as relaxed as when chatting with Ying Xian. Yang Yao cried for an unknown amount of time, her eyes swollen badly, and coupled with limited food for the 2, she was both hungry and aggrieved. "If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have returned to school so early. How good it was to stay at home. But there is no way to know everything early." Chu Zheng was also unwilling to ignore Yang Yao's negative energy and focused on exercising her own physical fitness. Before going to college, she had been learning dance all along. Although her skills were not as good as Ying Xian's, at least her movements were flexible. The food is about to bottom out, they can't stay in the dormitory all the time, they always have to go out. If you don't exercise well and get tired after running for 2 steps outside, it's better to commit suicide directly. The people here in Yingxian woke up one by one, and they all heard the outside noise. Everyone's faces were not very good. It's not good to be stuck here all the time. There are people waiting for us to go back home. I have 2 ideas. One is to smash the window and get out, but that would be like coming back in vain. The only things we can bring back are these 2 packages in the room. The other is, let's put it all together, kill all the zombies on the outside, and bring back the supplies. Yang Lu remained calm and gave everyone 2 suggestions. Everyone began to think. Some people who were afraid of death chose the first one directly, while others who cared about their family chose the second one. Things can be found again, but there is only one life, and I don't want to die. This is the only supermarket nearby. After you run away, you always come back. By then, the food will have been snatched away. What else are you eating? Starving to death is better than being bitten to death. I don't want to meet those ghosts again. Why don't you think about your family? There will always be a day when everything at home is finished. What will they do then? Both sides have their own opinions and there is a strong tendency to argue. Ying Xian pursed her lips and chose to put them together. She still has a bit of confidence in herself, and coupled with Uncle Zhang's kindness towards her, she has not forgotten it. If she puts in a fight, she may die at any cost. Anyway, she doesn't have any worries. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Finally returning to the community. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Finally returning to the community. Finally, there are more people who support joining forces than walking directly. Yang Lu instructed everyone to wrap up their exposed skin with anything they could find at hand and prepare mentally before moving the cabinet that was blocking the door. Before leaving, Yang Lu glanced at Ying Xian standing aside and calmly moved 2 steps behind her, letting her block in front of him. The door has opened. The zombies pounced directly. Everyone has gained experience and cooperates with their weapons in an orderly manner. The knife in Ying Xian's hand had a great advantage, and she used a lot of strength. With one strike, the zombie's head landed directly. The woman with the Madonna's heart attack was still hiding behind everyone. Yang Lu looked annoyed and pushed her out to block a blow when the zombie rushed towards her. The woman was quickly bitten and mutated, and was stabbed in the eye with a knife by Ying Xian, cleanly resolved. Yang Lu's gaze flickered slightly, and a smile of unknown meaning rose from the corner of his mouth. The woman who disagrees with herself has finally died. If anyone still opposes me in the future, all of them will die. The zombie fell in half one by one, and Ying Xian also found one of the most suitable ways to play with this knife in his hand. With smooth movements, even his teammates dared not approach him for a moment. She was afraid of being killed and her eyes turned red. She treated her as a zombie and slashed with a knife. After all, everyone is now dirty and doesn't look much better than zombies. About 30 zombies outside were taken care of by a group of people in less than half an hour. The supermarket regained its deathly silence, with only light or heavy breathing remaining. Everyone didn't waste time either, they found their own bags or suitcases from the zombie corpses in one place, and then breathed a sigh of relief. When we arrived, we drove 5 cars, but now the rest of us only have 2 cars, and there are even plenty of seats available. Everyone was shuttling between the supermarket and the car, loading as much supplies as possible into the car until it was full. After all, they don't want to come out frequently, so if they can bring more, they can bring more back. Yang Lu originally wanted to drive back alone in a car so that he could retrieve the entire vehicle's supplies, but Ying Xian walked towards him, his knife still dripping with blood. Uncle Yang, I like this car, give it to me. Although her words carried a sense of negotiation, her tone was not good, as there was a strong feeling that Yang Lu would kill him if he didn't give the car. Although Yang Lu didn't believe that Ying Xian really dared to kill, it was foolish to be enemies with her again at this time. He had no choice but to reluctantly hand over the car key to Ying Xian, with a fake smile on his lips. If you want it, take it. As an elder, can I still not follow you? This undoubtedly tells others that Ying Xian, relying on his own abilities, is arrogant. But this also means that Ying Xian can bring more of his own supplies back to the community. But Ying Xian didn't care. Once her goal was achieved, it was enough. No matter how others looked at her, after all, her strength was obvious to everyone. No matter how dissatisfied she was, no one dared to express it directly. A group of people returned with a full load, and the convoy drove into the community. It was not until the fence outside the community that the anxious left-behind residents in the community gathered around. Some people waited for their loved ones, while others looked at the empty carriage, tears streaming down their faces. "Why don't you protect my son well?" A sharp and elderly female voice sounded, and Yang Lu was already annoyed. He was caught off guard and was slapped, leaving him completely bewildered. The speaker was Zhang Long's mother, who died during this outing. She was a notorious overbearing old lady in the community. Someone quickly stopped Zhang's mother, who wanted to continue beating Yang Lu. Yang Lu finally regained his composure, his face even more gloomy, and a hint of killing intent flashed in his eyes. "Your son chose to go out with us, but he didn't kill zombies like us. Why should we protect him?" Yang Lu sneered and mercilessly retorted. Zhang Long died before entering the lounge. He dared not fight zombies and relied solely on hiding behind others. Later, the zombie scratched his hand and he quickly became infected. Ying Xian stabbed him in the eye with a knife, shattering his brain. Zhang's mother didn't care about these things. She just sat down on the ground and started cursing them for being heartless and not taking care of their orphans and widows. Before, there were not many people in the community who paid attention to her, and now there is no one to help her speak. Yang Lu turned around and took a bag of supplies from the car, placing it in front of Zhang's mother, showing a good attitude. "Your son has never killed a zombie before, so giving you so many supplies is our utmost kindness. If you continue to make trouble and attract the zombies, don't blame us for throwing you out." His voice was indifferent, paired with Zhang's resolute face, which frightened Zhang's mother for a moment. But on second thought, she could just cry and get these supplies, but her son died for them. As for attracting zombies. Anyway, there's still Yang Lu and the others around, what are you afraid of? My son has died, and no one will go find supplies for her in the future. If I don't ask them to take out more food, what should I do in the future? Zhang's mother thought, crying even louder. I'm an old lady, these things won't last long. You must give me a few more bags. Yang Lu sneered and didn't pay any attention to her anymore. Instead, he distributed a bag of supplies to each of the family members who had lost their loved ones, and then called on those who had gone out to return home. Others wisely left with supplies, leaving only Zhang's mother sitting on the ground, ignored. Zhang's mother didn't get what she wanted, and Yang Lu and others left again. She didn't dare to cry anymore, afraid that it would really attract zombies, so she had to go home disheveled. Ying Xian also returned home, with many mother and baby supplies installed in her car, all for Uncle Zhang and his wife. After moving the things in the car back home, Ying Xian sorted out 2 large bags of supplies and knocked on Uncle Zhang's door. "Uncle Zhang, I brought you something and left it at the door for you." She was about to put things down when Uncle Zhang opened the door, and behind her stood his wife with a big belly. Uncle Zhang hasn't had a child for so many years, and his wife finally got pregnant, but the end of the world suddenly came. The child was not born so soon, and Uncle Zhang did not prepare any mother and baby supplies. He was worried, so Ying Xian sent something. Uncle Zhang's eyes lit up when he saw the milk powder in a semi-transparent plastic bag. "Xiao Ying, thank you, Uncle." Even Yang Lijuan behind Uncle Zhang was carrying a big belly, her eyes turning red. When Uncle Zhang decided to send supplies to Ying Xian, Yang Lijuan did not object and even brought more noodles to her. Over the years, the couple has also watched Ying Xian grow up. Now that the end of the world is breaking out and school is about to start, there won't be much food at home, so the couple naturally won't want her to starve to death at home. As a gesture of gratitude, Ying Xian sent so much food, and the couple even said they would keep her to eat anything. Ying Xian couldn't refuse, so he had to stay. Looking at Uncle Zhang and Yang Lijuan busy in the kitchen, Ying Xian felt a warm heart. She sent a message to Chu Zheng to report her safety, but there was no response. Ying Xian had to put away her phone and wait quietly for the meal to begin. During this period, everyone has been very frugal in cooking, but Uncle Zhang and his wife still made 3 dishes that looked very tempting. After finishing the meal, Uncle Zhang tidied up the dishes and Yang Lijuan sat down on the sofa holding Ying Xian. Xiao Ying, we never thought about preparing milk powder, thanks to you. I don't know when this world will return to normal, but you will always be a benefactor to our family. Don't be polite if you have anything to do in the future, just come to us. Yang Lijuan held Ying Xian's hand, tears in her eyes. Ying Xian pursed her lips and smiled, her gaze fixed on her bulging belly, suddenly feeling a bit sad. If the issue of zombies cannot be solved, children born in this era will be the least happy generation. But she didn't express her inner thoughts, instead she pulled the topic apart. After returning home, Ying Xian received a reply from Chu Zheng. Just go home safely. Someone has already organized a team at school to start killing zombies. Many zombies died today, and there are also people preparing to go out of our building. I signed up, and there are still 2 fruit knives in the dormitory. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Decision to return to school alone. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Decision to return to school alone. Ying Xian, who received this message, felt a bit complicated inside. On one hand, she was happy that Chu Jing dared to step out of the dormitory, and on the other hand, she was worried that she would die in the mouth of the zombie. Chu Zheng has learned dance and his body is flexible enough, but he has no skills in killing zombies. After hesitating for a while, she finally summarized her experience and sent it to Chu Zheng. No matter how hot the weather is, try not to expose your skin. Wear a mask, and if you have goggles, remember to wear them to prevent splashing blood or brain fluid from entering the body through your facial features. When Ying Xian typed the 3 words, goggles, on the screen, his brain suddenly had an answer to why he suddenly awakened his ability. If it weren't for her unique genes, could it be that she didn't pay attention when killing zombies, and the blood or brain plasma of the zombies splashed into her eyes? But this is just a guess, and she didn't dare to tell Chu Zheng. She was afraid that Chu Zheng would suddenly have a brain twitch, so she wiped her eyes with zombie blood, activated her powers, and even become a zombie. It would be too much of a loss. The 2 of them communicated about the technique of beating zombies, and Ying Xian charged his phone before going to take a shower. Before going to Uncle Zhang's house, she changed into a new coat, but there was still a smell of zombies on her body, and the more she smelled it, the more disgusting it became. After taking a shower, there is still this smell in the room. Ying Xian piled up all the dirty clothes together, lit them with a lighter, and burned them all. Only then did he start organizing the collected supplies with peace of mind. Looking at the crowded kitchen, Ying Xian felt a sense of accomplishment all over her body. She suddenly remembered her superpower and quickly returned to the room, closed the curtains, summoned tender buds, and then used her mind to quickly grow them into vines. Vines grow from the wrist, but Ying Xian doesn't feel any pain. She tried to manipulate the vines to roll up the desk lamp, but one of them didn't control it well and broke the fragile plastic shell of the lamp. Feeling the terrifying power of the vine, Ying Xian fell silent. If this is used well, she is simply invincible. For the next 3 hours, Ying Xian and Ting Man played happily until they were able to skillfully divide the Ting Man in half, then accurately entangle the attacking target and strangle it. And she can also summon vines with or without thorns according to her own ideas. Ying Xian practiced happily until she saw a mess in the room. The lights in the room flickered twice at this moment, and Ying Xian quickly tidied up the messy ground before lying contentedly on the bed. She used a lot of powers just now, and combined with tidying up the room, now her fingers are so tired that she doesn't want to move. But fortunately, the abilities are used and replenished quickly. She covered her head with a blanket, lost in thought, and fell asleep. The next day, Chu Zheng had already formed a small team of over 20 people, all of whom were girls. The goal of the trip was not to kill zombies, but to find more food and daily necessities to store in the dormitory. Yang Yaoyao refused Chu Zheng's proposal to go out together, so she didn't want to take risks. As for food, if Chu Jing could bring back something to eat, he would definitely feel embarrassed to eat alone. Yang Yaoyao's parents asked her to take good care of herself, so she calmly waited in the dormitory for Chu Jing, who was out, to bring back food. Chu Jing didn't think much of the rejection and simply moved the cabinet that was blocking the door and walked out. Although everyone is a girl, they are all proactive and mentally prepared to kill zombies. They are not from the same dormitory, and there is no emotional connection or tacit understanding between them. At the beginning, everyone cooperated well to kill a few zombies in the hallway, but when they were about to leave the dormitory door, a large number of zombies rushed up crazily, causing them to panic. In the chaos, some people quickly mutated after being scratched, some pulled unfamiliar teammates to block zombies, while others disregarded their own safety and rushed out of the zombie encirclement with living people. When the team of more than 20 people hid in a small room, there were only 13 people left. Chu Jing sat in the corner, slowly wiping the blood-stained fruit knife in his hand with a tissue. The girls present cheered and cheered each other on. They all looked disheveled, but after the fight just now, the fear in their eyes had faded a lot. Where are we going next? Someone asked this important question, and the girl who organized the team thought for a moment before answering, go to the nearest small shop to us. There are small shops near every dormitory in K University for students to purchase daily necessities, which is indeed the best place to collect supplies. Everyone rested for half an hour, carrying various weapons, and headed towards the small shop. When Ying Xian woke up, it was almost noon and her phone displayed 2 messages sent by Chu Jing. There was a 2-hour gap between the 2 messages. We are ready to depart, we are resting, everyone is very impressive. We plan to go to the small shop, don't worry. Ying Xian looked at the message displayed on the phone screen, and suddenly a bold idea appeared in his heart. She's going back to school. Yang Yaoyao moved in during her junior year, and they haven't had much communication or deep feelings. But Chu Jing is different. She and Su Wu pulled themselves out of the darkness with the utmost kindness and tenderness. Now there is no news from Su Wu, it is estimated that she can't lose Chu Jing anymore. Ying Xian simply ate some noodles, wrapped the longer fruit knife used to cut watermelons in newspaper, put it in his backpack, and added some chocolate and 3 bottles of mineral water. Fortunately, I now have a car and Ying Xian is driving it. After leaving the community, he is heading directly towards K University. K is about 4 or 5 kilometers away from the community, not far, but also not close. Along the way, she saw many zombies eating around a person's corpse, and also saw the ground full of corpses being eaten by stray cats and dogs. Human purgatory, but that's all. The more the car drove on the main road, the more terrifying it became. A series of car accidents occurred ahead, blocking the road to death. Ying Xian's car cannot pass. She sat in the car, feeling a bit conflicted. At this moment, she caught sight of a motorcycle not far away, with a key inserted. It was estimated that the owner had just planned to ride the bike and run away when he was bitten by a zombie. Ying Xian wrapped his back and carefully observed the surroundings. Fortunately, this place is not far from the school, and there are not many zombies on the road, but as long as the motorcycle is fast enough, there is still a chance to get rid of the zombies. Ying Xian gritted his teeth, grabbed the knife in his hand, got off the car directly, and ran towards the motorcycle. The roar of the motorcycle was much louder than that of a car. Ying Xian rode the bike towards the school, followed by more than 10 zombies attracted by the sound. Along the way, there was no danger, and Ying Xian rode his bike into the school from the long-damaged facial recognition railing. At this time, the campus was also littered with corpses, but there were not many zombies, probably solved by the students. Based on his memory, Ying Xian rode his bike to the small shop near the dormitory building. As she thought, Chu Jing and others were struggling with a dozen or so zombies. She didn't have time to lament the long absence, so she drew her sword and charged towards Chu Jing. The zombie's head instantly fell to the ground, and Ying Xian's sudden addition turned the tide of the battle. She struck one by one, leaving all the students present stunned. Chu Zheng, I'm here. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Saving Roommates. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Saving Roommates. At the moment Chu Zheng saw Ying Xian, tears almost fell from her eyes. But she ignored these emotions, clenched the fruit knife, and together with Ying Xian, aimed at the zombie's head and launched an attack. A dozen or so zombies were quickly eliminated, and the blood and brains in the area made everyone extremely nauseous. The group entered the small shop, closed the glass door, and then Chu Zheng had time to talk to Ying Xian. How did you come? It's so dangerous. Although it was a questioning tone, Ying Xian almost burst into tears upon hearing it. I'm worried that you won't be able to do it yet. After finishing this sentence, she spoke in a voice that only two people could hear. I brought a lot of food home yesterday, so there's no need to worry about eating for now. Let's go back and ask Yang Yaoyao if we should come back to my house together. The idea of accepting Yang Yaoyao is not her holy mother. Although they don't have a deep emotional connection, they have lived together for a year at least. We have had conflicts and warmth, and we can't just watch her die. Chu Zheng has no objection to this decision. Ying Xian handed the longer fruit knife from her bag to Chu Zheng, and she tried to swing it twice, afraid of accidentally injuring others. She immediately put it in the sheath made of newspaper. Other girls also quickly collected a lot of food, and everyone had big and small bags in their hands. They need to hurry back to the dormitory before the next batch of zombies arrive. Chu Zheng and Ying Xian each packed their backpacks and ran towards the direction of the dormitory. Most of the zombies in the dormitory are located there. As long as one person becomes zombie, it means that the entire dormitory will eventually become zombie. The two of them safely returned to their dormitories. When Yang Yaoyao saw Ying Xian, a hint of joy flashed in her eyes. The fact that Ying Xian has learned combat is not a secret. Since she can come to find herself alive, she must have some skills. There are so many zombies at school, she doesn't want to stay here and wait to die. If you can follow Ying Xian, at least you don't have to worry about the zombie problem. Anyway, the two of them will solve it. But she didn't know whether Ying Xian was planning to go home or stay in the dormitory. After hesitating, she didn't dare to ask. Seeing Yang Yaoyao's hesitant expression, Ying Xian spoke first. Yao Yao, do you want to go to my house? As soon as Ying Xian uttered this sentence, Yang Yaoyao nodded eagerly. Although this reaction was too quick, Ying Xian didn't think much. Everyone wanted to live. If they stayed in a student dormitory with a huge population, if one day a zombie broke out of the dormitory and Yang Yaoyao stayed alone, it would basically be ruined. The three of them packed their belongings and left the dormitory, but Ying Xian made a mistake. This motorcycle can accommodate two people, but it is indeed a bit difficult to accommodate a third person. Three people squeezed, and Ying Xian reluctantly drove the motorcycle out of the school. The car she drove from the community is still on the way. As long as she can ride to the parking spot, she can change back to the community. Along the way, Ying Xian rode the bike extremely fast, and Yang Yaoyao's face turned pale from fear in the back seat. She tightly hugged Chu Zheng's waist, feeling a strong nausea in her heart. After finally getting on the car and the moment the door closed, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Yang Yaoyao's face was covered in tears as she held on to Chu Zheng and tried to wipe away her tears, only to be pushed away by Chu Zheng in disgust. Ying Xian, are there any zombies in your house? Seeing that Chu Zheng ignored her, Yang Yaoyao had to find Ying Xian, who was driving, to chat with her. These past few days, Yang Yaoyao has been living next door to zombies every day, so scared that she can't eat or sleep well. What she is most looking forward to now is being able to find a quiet environment that allows her to have a good night's sleep. Ying Xian caught a glimpse of Yang Yaoyao's expectant expression in the rearview mirror and answered softly, I don't think so. It's all cleaned up by someone. Upon hearing these words, the anticipation on Yang Yaoyao's face turned into joy, almost cheering out loud. When the car arrived at the entrance of the community, Ying Xian saw several zombies blocking the fence machine. They were colliding towards the iron fence, and inside the fence machine was Yang Lu holding a watermelon knife. Yang Lu saw Ying Xian driving back, and before he could even think of when she would leave, he saw Ying Xian getting off the car with a knife and going straight up to confront the zombie. Immediately after, a stranger girl also got off the car, learned the action of responding to strings, and stabbed the zombie's eyes with a fruit knife in her hand. Everyone present knows that there is no reason to watch a little girl kill a zombie and avoid it yourself. But Yang Lu had no intention of going out, coldly watching others go to help Ying Xian, and standing inside the fence watching humans and zombies fight. They all have experience, and there are only 6 or 7 zombies stuck outside. The zombie was quickly resolved, and before Yang Lu could question Ying Xian, another crying girl got off the car. It's too scary. Ying Xian, didn't you say there were no zombies in your house? Yang Yaoyao's almost questioning tone stunned Ying Xian for a moment, but she quickly realized that her tone was not as affectionate and gentle as before. You see clearly, this is the zombie outside the fence. My house is inside the fence, she said. Yang Yaoyao's face turned red as she spoke these words, unable to utter a single answer for a long time, and her eyes were filled with dissatisfaction. Yang Lu looked at Yang Yaoyao's face, rubbed his chin with his fingers, and a hint of inexplicable light flashed in his eyes. At this point, Chu Zheng and Ying Xian also returned to the car. Transportation is still quite important now, and Ying Xian doesn't want to leave the car outside the community. Seeing this, Yang Yaoyao didn't care about anything else and quickly got into the car. Until she drove to the doorstep of Ying Xian's house, Yang Yaoyao still had an air-filled expression. Ying Xian glanced at Yang Yaoyao and suddenly regretted why he had taken her home. Ying Xian and Chu Zheng got off the car directly with their bags, and Yang Yaoyao also hurriedly took her bag, which was filled with many clothes and cosmetics when she left, and followed them into the villa. In addition to Ying Xian's parents and Ying Xian's own rooms, there are also 2 guest rooms in the villa. After allocating their respective rooms, Ying Xian pulled Chu Zheng back to his own room. The 2 of them took turns washing up, and Ying Xian sat cross-legged on the bed, looking at the ceiling, feeling very sad. Chu Zheng wiped her wet hair and walked out of the bathroom. At a glance, she saw Ying Xian's appearance and said, "What's wrong with you?" Ying Xian sighed and said, "I just suddenly regret bringing Yang Yaoyao home. Her questioning just now made me really uncomfortable. But we have already brought her back and can't drive her away. I'll talk to her later. In this situation, if she doesn't change her bad temper, it will be over sooner or later." Ying Xian nodded, and before she could say anything, the door was knocked on. Yang Yaoyao's voice came from outside the door, "What will we eat later? I'm so hungry." Ying Xian and Chu Zheng exchanged a glance, both seeing the helplessness in each other's eyes. "You can cook some noodles yourself, we're not hungry." Ying Xian answered, and Yang Yaoyao outside the door immediately snorted angrily, "I don't know how to cook noodles. When I'm at home, it's always done by a nanny." The meaning of this is to have Ying Xian or Chu Zheng personally cook noodles for her. But now both of them were very tired, and Chu Zheng directly retorted, "If you don't know how to cook, just go hungry." End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Space. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Space. Yang Yaoyao outside the door heard Chu Zheng's words and her eyes turned red. Before these ghostly things appeared, she had never experienced this anger before, and her family also followed her. She was not allowed to cook and eat by herself. Now when zombies appear, they rely on their abilities and bully themselves like this. If it had been before, she wouldn't have stayed here long ago, and her parents wouldn't have let her suffer such injustice. The more she thought, the more she felt aggrieved. She went downstairs with tears in her eyes and found some snacks from the kitchen to eat. The food in Ying Xian's home was specially found by her, with a strong sense of fullness but average taste. Yang Yaoyao sat on the sofa, holding a pile of snacks and nibbling on them, tears streaming down her face. After Yang Yaoyao left, Ying Xian and Chu Zheng sighed one after another. Forget about this temper before, Su Wu is still used to her. Now that Su Wu's whereabouts are unknown, I don't want to have a princess by my side. Chu Zheng felt helpless and regretted not preventing Ying Xian from bringing her back. Who knew that her temper still hasn't changed to this day? Ying Xian looked up at the sky and felt helpless. There are more and more vacant villas in the community now. If it's really not possible, I'll give her something and let her live in another house. No matter what happens in the future, it's none of our business. The two of them chatted haphazardly in the room for a while, but soon fell asleep. Ying Xian saw her mother in her dream. Yingmu still had the gentle and intellectual appearance in her memory, and the kindness on her face almost made Ying Xian cry. In the dream, Yingmu held her hand and spoke apologetically. Xian, Mom and Dad don't want to leave you so early and let you survive alone in this situation. Before your grandmother passed away, she passed me an ancestral jade ring, which was placed in the dark compartment of my dressing table. You can go get it and put it on, just like Mom changed her way of accompanying you. After speaking, her figure gradually became transparent until it completely disappeared. Ying Xian suddenly opened his eyes. Awakened from a dream. It was already dark outside the window, and Ying Xian glanced at Chu Zheng, who was still sleeping next to him, and got off the bed lightly. She found the one belonging to her parents' room from the key she carried with her and carefully opened the door that was always locked. Everything in the room is neatly arranged, and Ying Xian often comes in to clean it, just to prevent the cleanliness-obsessed mother from feeling uncomfortable when she sees the dusty room in the heavenly spirit. She walked up to the dressing table, her mind conjuring up the image of Yingmu quietly dressing, her eyes turning sour. But now is not the time for sadness. Ying Xian found the dark grid, instinctively held his breath, and slowly opened it. There was a red ring box in the dark compartment, and she took out the ring box and opened the lid. A nearly transparent white ring lay quietly in the box, and Ying Xian picked it up and magically put it on his middle finger. The ring is very suitable, and at the moment it reaches the base of the finger, Ying Xian's finger suddenly hurts. That ring suddenly changed from translucent white to red slowly, as if drinking blood. Ying Xian stared blankly at the scene before him. When the ring turned pure bright red, it suddenly disappeared from the middle finger of the corresponding string, leaving only a very thin red line on the finger. Ying Xian was very silent and speechless. Her middle finger is now very cold and has lost its color, looking pale and pale. Just as Ying Xian was thinking about the usefulness of this ring, a warehouse of about 200 square meters suddenly appeared in front of him. The space is empty, with nothing. Space. Ying Xian was instantly excited and felt that even a little more of her blood was absorbed by the ring. She tried to manipulate her mind and throw the ring box in her hand into the space. Success. Ying Xian tirelessly took out the ring box from the space, emitting pleasure from all over her body. With space, you don't have to worry about not being able to take things with you when you go out. Unfortunately, she just tried and couldn't fit herself into the space, otherwise what zombies would she worry about in the future? But Ying Xian quickly thought of the issue of time flow velocity in space. She stomped downstairs and took a bag of frozen dumplings from the freezer, throwing them into the space. She decided to take them out tomorrow to see if they had thawed. Although I don't know if the space ring will be taken away by others, now the ring has also become a red line. She doesn't say, who knows it's space. It's getting late now. If the dumplings don't thaw tomorrow, she can go to the supermarket again and store more things in the space. Compared to the peaceful years of the Ying Xian family, Ong Lu's place appears particularly chaotic. Zhang's mother came knocking on the door again, sitting on the ground crying and howling, making the nearby neighbors unable to sleep. But Zhang's mother was looking for Yang Lu, and they didn't want to get involved. Who knows if they might get into trouble because of this. How heartless. My son, why did you leave? Leave me as an old lady, I really can't live anymore. She cried and howled while patting Yang Lu's door with her hands. At first, she was still crying and howling. Later, when Zhang's mother saw that Yang Lu couldn't come out, she became so angry that she cursed at him with any vulgar language. Yang Lu couldn't bear it anymore and stopped pretending to be a good person. He walked out with the watermelon knife he found in the deserted villa. If you call me again, I'll send you to see your son. Oh, no, your son has already turned into a zombie. If you call me again, I'll throw you out to feed the zombie. Yang Lu's tone was fierce, with a clear murderous intent in his eyes. Zhang's mother was taken aback and cried even louder. Do you want to kill someone? You heartless person, you can't save me from death. If it weren't for you, how could my son have died? Although Zhang's mother was crying, she also knew that Yang Lu had a knife in his hand and could never be tough with him. Seeing that Zhang's mother was afraid of the knife in her hand, Yang Lu's heart straightened and grabbed her collar, dragging her towards the entrance of the community. Zhang's mother always thought that Yang Lu wanted face and didn't dare to do anything to herself. Seeing him get angry now, she was instantly scared out of her wits. She quickly apologized, but Yang Lu did not let go. This old lady has always been a curse, and now no one cares about killing. If he wants to establish a strong presence in the community, she is a good choice. No matter how hard Zhang struggled, she couldn't break free from Yang Lu's hand until she was thrown outside the fence. I'll keep my word and send you to see your son. After finishing his last sentence, Yang Lu took a few steps back and watched as the zombies around him, who had long been attracted by Zhang's mother's cries, surrounded her. He mercilessly turned around and left. But Yang Lu still underestimated Zhang's mother's voice. After the zombies surrounded her, Zhang's mother shouted with all her strength, Yang Lu. You son of a bitch. The zombies in the distance followed the sound, and Yang Lu thought to himself that it was not good. He quickly knocked on the door from door to door. Most people were sleeping, and when Yang Lu heard that there were more and more zombies, they were scared out of their wits. Ying Xian and Chu Zheng were also awakened in a daze. Upon learning that there were many zombies, they quickly changed their clothes and woke up Yang Yaoyao, who was sleeping soundly. Now there is no need to worry about the issue of space exposure. Ying Xian supports the Chu Zheng and quickly collects food and daily necessities from the kitchen into the space. The fence machine couldn't stop such a large group of zombies, they rushed in and rampaged through the community. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Forced escape from the community. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Forced escape from the community. Ying Xian clenched the knife in his hand and looked at Yang Yaoyao, who was carrying cosmetics and clothes stuffed in a mess. He couldn't help but feel angry. What else are you doing with these? Get a knife. When Yang Yaoyao first arrived at her house, Ying Xian gave her a kitchen knife. But now she is only holding clothes and cosmetics, and she doesn't know where she threw that knife. Yang Yaoyao, who was suddenly yelled at, was also very aggrieved. She slept soundly and was suddenly awakened to say that a zombie had arrived. Previously, there were so many zombies in the dormitory that they couldn't break through the door. Now just close the door, I'm afraid they might do something. Besides, isn't there still Ying Xian and Chu Zheng here? The creaking outside the door became increasingly chaotic, and the unique stench of zombies drifted in through the crack of the door. Ying Xian and Chu Zheng worked together to block the sofa and windows with sofas and cabinets, but they both knew that this was not a long-term solution. The door at home is inward opening, which is easier to knock open than outward opening. Yang Yaoyao snorted coldly when she saw that they had no intention of going out. You're not going out again. Why wake me up? I'm going back to my room to sleep. After she finished speaking, she turned around and was about to return to the room when Ying Xian suddenly spoke up, "Do you really think these things can block the zombies? Now quickly change your clothes, take the knife I gave you, and prepare to leave." Yang Yaoyao was only wearing thin short-sleeved shorts and pajamas, and if a zombie really broke in, she would easily get injured. There is no back door at home, the only way out is through the front door. Nowadays, there are definitely many zombies in the community, leaving them hard is definitely not a good choice, they can only run. The mournful cries of living people being torn apart after the door was smashed have already sounded outside. Ying Xian suddenly remembered Uncle Zhang and pregnant Yang Lijuan, hesitated for a while, and finally shared her thoughts with Chu Zheng. "I live next door with a very nice couple. If we really have to run in the end, I want to bring them along. Don't worry, we can get in the car." Chu Zheng has no objection, but Ying Xian can come to the school to find him regardless of his own safety. No matter what decision she makes, she will support it unconditionally. The zombie had already knocked the sofa behind the door out of its original position, and Yang Yaoyao was still hiding in the room. Ying Xian and Chu Zheng also knew that she was useless, so they clenched the knives in their hands. At the moment the door was knocked open, zombies rushed towards them like crazy. Fortunately, the door is not large, and even the zombies standing in front can block some of the zombies behind. Ying Xian swung his sword towards the zombie, and with just one strike, the zombie's head fell to the ground, rolling its bones for a short distance. But when Ying Xian's next knife struck the zombie's neck, it got stuck in the bone. Ying Xian clearly felt that the bones of this zombie were harder than those of the others. Without much thought, she summoned the vine with her other hand, plunged it straight into its eye socket, and then crushed its brain. The vine stained with zombie blood grew thicker and thicker. Ying Xian forcefully pulled out the knife stuck in the bone, while driving the vine to strangle the neck of the zombie that was rushing up, and then directly pulled its head off. There are not many zombies here, probably only 7 or 8. After solving the zombies at home, Yang Yaoyao still hid in her room without any intention of coming out. Ying Xian didn't care how surprised Chu Zheng was when he saw her using her powers, so he pulled her and ran towards Uncle Zhang's house. The door of Uncle Zhang's house had long been knocked open, and when Ying Xian walked in, he found that the zombies were blocking a room on the first floor. The power consumed just now has not been fully replenished, so Ying Xian pulled out his knife and forcefully inserted the tip of the knife into the back of the zombie's head. After another turn, the zombie fell straight to the ground. After dealing with the zombies stuck in front of the door, Ying Xian knocked on the door. "Uncle Zhang, are you okay?" "It's me, Xiao Ying." A rustling sound came from the room, and Yang Lijuan stumbled to open the door. She had already shed tears on her face. Ying Xian followed the open door and looked inside. There was a large pool of blood on the ground in the room, with Uncle Zhang lying on the ground. Uncle Zhang was scratched by a zombie. Yang Lijuan followed her gaze and looked at Uncle Zhang who had fallen to the ground. Tears filled her eyes and slid down her cheeks from the corner of her eyes. After feeling scratched, he committed suicide with a kitchen knife. Yang Lijuan's voice choked up, but Ying Xian felt very guilty. If she came a few minutes earlier, would Uncle Zhang not have to die? But now is not the time for autumn sadness. Ying Xian ran to the kitchen, collected the few cans of milk powder and Uncle Zhang's mother and baby supplies into the space, and escorted Yang Lijuan, who had a big belly, towards the outside of the villa. Chu Zheng also arrived at this moment. She didn't know Yang Lijuan, but Ying Xian's expression was not very good, so she wisely didn't ask much. The number of zombies outside is still increasing gradually. Yang Lu finished dealing with the zombie brought in by Zhang's mother at the door and retreated step by step. Coincidentally, he saw Ying Xian and Chu Zheng entering Uncle Zhang's house. He let out a cold smile at the corner of his mouth and entered Ying Xian's house through the half-open door, directly meeting the crying Yang Yaoyao. Soon, members of Yang Lu's team drove over to pick him up. 3 vehicles carrying Yang Lu and his willing followers drove towards the gate, directly colliding with nearby zombies attempting to pounce. Ying Xian didn't waste any time either. After helping Yang Lijuan leave her home, she got into the car parked at Ying Xian's doorstep, and Chu Jing also returned to the villa to ask Yang Yaoyao to go with her. But she called for a long time, and Yang Yaoyao didn't even come out. It wasn't until Chu Jing opened the door that she realized Yang Yaoyao and her clothes and cosmetics had disappeared. Chu Jing didn't know where she had gone, so she had to return to the car. Yang Yaoyao has taken her things and I don't know where she went. Let's go first. Upon hearing this, Ying Xian stepped on the accelerator and drove towards the direction of the gate. Yang Yaoyao is likely to follow Yang Lu, so they don't have to be angry with Yang Yaoyao anymore. At this moment, in Yang Lu's car. Uncle Yang, thank you for taking me with you. When Yang Yaoyao spoke, she had lost her pride in front of Ying Xian and Chu Jing, and looked like a naive little girl who was not familiar with the world. Yang Lu glanced at Yang Yaoyao from the rearview mirror, with a slight curve of inexplicable meaning rising at the corner of his mouth. You're welcome, but I'm curious. Why were you left behind by Xiaoying? Upon hearing this question, Yang Yaoyao's face stiffened for a moment, and she stuttered and replied, Ying Xian has a bad temper. Maybe I said something to make her unhappy before. The curve of Yang Lu's mouth became increasingly eerie, and his voice also carried a strange feeling. So it's like this, that really hurts you. Yang Yaoyao couldn't understand Yang Lu's attitude and smiled awkwardly twice without answering. The car drove further and further away, and Yang Yaoyao dared not speak. The car fell into a strange silence for a moment. At this moment, Ying Xian also drove away from the community. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Entering the Church. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Entering the Church. Ying Xian's goal is the church in the city center. When the zombies erupted, it was early Sunday morning and there was no one to worship in the church, making it a great place to go. And she has also been to this church several times with her Christian classmates before. Although it is located in the city center, the foot traffic is not very high. On the way, Chu Jing hesitated for a long time, but still asked the questions in his heart. What was that on your hand just now? Ying Xian's grip on the steering wheel tightened, and Chu Jing noticed her attitude and quickly added a sentence. If you don't want to say anything, then I won't ask. Anyway, I know you won't harm us. She was interrupted by Ying Xian before she could finish speaking. That's a power, I can control vines to attack, but I can't use it all the time. It's limited, and once the power is used up, I'll be very tired. My body will force me to rest and then replenish the power. Chu Jing nodded vaguely and said, if you accidentally use your powers, I will protect you. At this moment, Yang Lijuan in the back seat was clutching her stomach with a dejected expression on her face. Ying Xian saw something wrong with Yang Lijuan in the rearview mirror and asked with concern, Aunt Yang, what's wrong with you? Yang Lijuan gave a bitter smile and said, it's okay, I just feel like I can't help you with anything. Ying Xian was taken aback and immediately comforted her, but at first, you and Uncle Zhang helped me. Aunt Yang, don't think so much, I will do my best to protect you. And me too. Chu Jing hurriedly spoke up. Ying Xian heard the sound and turned his head. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Yang Lijuan chuckled and said, okay, then I'll trouble you two little girls. Once we find a place to live, I'll leave cooking to you. My skills are not bad. The dull atmosphere inside the car only eased a bit. Ying Xian quickly drove the car to the entrance of the church. There were 2 or 3 wandering zombies near the church. Ying Xian got off the car first and manipulated the vines to deal with them. Only then did he and Chu Jing help Yang Lijuan out of the car. The quaint and serious church stands among the tall buildings around it, appearing somewhat out of place. And there is a red cross standing upright at the spire of the church, which, combined with the present, has the only sense of sanctity in cruelty. The three of them walked towards the church gate, only to find that the lock outside the church had been broken, but was locked from inside. "Is anyone there? Can you open the door for us to enter?" Ying Xian tentatively shouted softly towards the crack in the door, but after a while, someone answered. "You guys go somewhere else to hide, who knows if you've been infected. Under the apocalypse, it is normal to have such concerns." Ying Xian took a breath and continued, "We don't have any wounds on our bodies. You can carefully examine us after we enter." The people inside didn't answer anymore, obviously they didn't want to talk to her. The two sides were deadlocked for a while, and no matter what Ying Xian said, the people inside had no intention of opening the door. Seeing this, Ying Xian felt helpless and suddenly remembered that there was a back door behind the church. She plans to try her luck by going around the back door. So the three of them circled around to the back door, and as expected, the lock outside the back door was still intact. But she doesn't know how to pry the lock, and if she smashes this lock, there will be too much noise. "I'll give it a try." The speaker was Chu Zheng. Ying Xian turned back in shock and then watched as she took down a hair clip from her hair. In the movie, they all used hairpins to pry locks, and I happen to be wearing one. I'll try and see if I can pry it open. Perhaps this is another village where mountains and rivers are poor and there is no way out, with hidden willows and bright flowers. Ying Xian quickly moved away from her position, then watched Chu Jing break open the character clip and insert one end into the keyhole, twisting left and right. The lock on the back door was an old-fashioned padlock. Chu Jing bent over and worked diligently for 3 or 4 minutes before finally opening the lock. She carefully pulled open the old-fashioned iron bolt and pushed open the back door that had not been opened or locked for a long time. The three of them sneaked into the back door, but the next second they met the person who rushed to the back door and wanted to block it with something. As soon as the person saw them come in, he was about to remind the people in the chapel when Ying Xian covered his mouth and spoke in his ear. "We only have 3 people, none of whom are infected. Let's go in." The person was still struggling, and Chu Jing directly pressed the knife given to her by Ying Xian against his waist. The cold blade pressed against his waist through his clothes, and he didn't struggle anymore. Ying Xian released the hand that was covering his mouth, but Chu Jing did not retract the knife that was pressed against his waist. After all, Chu Jing is also worried about that person shouting. Ying Xian turned around and locked the back door, then gently moved a few chairs piled up nearby to block the door before taking the person towards the chapel. The 4 of them arrived at the chapel, and upon seeing it, a huge white cross hung on the wall at the end, while Jesus was nailed to the cross with his head lowered. The lights in the church were dim and flickering. Many people sat scattered on rows of benches, hearing the commotion and turning their heads. Before Ying Xian could speak, 5 or 6 people stood up from their chairs, holding various weapons and surrounding them. "Didn't they say they wouldn't let you in?" The middle-aged woman led by her was full of anger, holding a wooden stick that pointed straight at Ying Xian's nose. "We have no choice but to seek the Lord's protection as there are zombies outside and we have nowhere to go. God loves humanity." Ying Xian, relying on the words that Christians often say when he comes to church in his memory, directly begins to fabricate. There are conservatively estimated to be over 20 people in the church. If there is a direct conflict, even if there are supernatural powers, they may not be able to retreat completely. It is better to try to approach them in the name of God. After all, most of the people who still want to come to church after the zombie outbreak are Christians. As expected, when the woman heard the word "master," her anger on her face decreased slightly, but her eyes were still full of precautions. Ying Xian immediately spoke up. "The official said that if you are injured by a zombie, you will be infected within 10 minutes at the latest. It has been more than 10 minutes since we knocked on the door just now, and we are still fine. What are you worried about?" The woman hesitated for a moment upon hearing the words, but still waved her hand. Who knows if the official data is true or false? If you want to stay, go to the confessional room and isolate yourself. I will let you out in an hour, so everyone can rest assured. Ying Xian did not refuse. In the end of the world, it is not wrong for everyone to be so cautious. Someone walked up and confiscated the knife in Chu Zheng's hand. Just as she was about to say something, she received a comforting look from Ying Xian. When she came in, she put her knife in the space, which also contained a few of the various knives found at home. So someone took the three of them to a 1.1 confessional room and directly locked them inside. The dim confessional room was very small, and Ying Xian sat on a chair, while Chu Zheng and Yang Lijuan next to him did not speak. As time passed by, Ying Xian took out the frozen dumplings she had thrown into the space. The dumplings are still in a hard frozen state, and Ying Xian is instantly overjoyed. It seems that anything placed in the space can maintain its original state no matter how long it is placed. End of this chapter.